Welcome to Funding and Disrupting, the most in-depth business podcast for companies looking to raise money and the investors who fund them. Every episode, we interview a funded founder, plus the investor who funded them, to get the real story of how it all came together. If you're searching for funding for a disruptive technology or business, or you're searching for the best companies to invest in, then you've come to the right place. This episode of Funding and Disrupting is brought to you by Aura Collective, a leading tech PR and marketing firm. Let's get funding and disrupting.
Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Keith Herman, and welcome to today's special extended episode of Funding and Disrupting. We're pleased to have our venture capital guest, Tobias Schwind, the managing partner of FTTF. FTTF provides venture capital for startups using Fraunhofer Technology. They recently led the seed funding round for a company named ConstellR. In addition, we also have our tech founder guest, Max Gulde. Max is the co-founder and CEO of ConstellR. ConstellR is a space data and services company leading how to deliver daily global land surface temperature maps for the agri-tech industry. Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Keith. Very nice having us here.
Yes. So you and Max are both based in Germany, a country known for all sorts of innovation that includes cars, interior design, and emerging cutting-edge technologies such as AI and blockchain. How would you describe the evolution of emerging technologies since you got in the space?
In general, I would say that in Germany, we do have a lot of technology knowledge, and we are lagging a little bit behind related to entrepreneurial culture, but we are picking up compared to 10, 15 years ago. So there are a lot of, I would say, upcoming or existing programs of funding, some which do really generate new, I would say, stars in the market, stars in terms of spin-off startups. And we have more and more unicorns also in Germany, so that's good. But still, we do not have that, let's say, cultural as it is placed in the US for the moment. And
what are your thoughts on that, Max?
I'm a scientist at heart. I have a 10-year scientific career, and back then it was awesome to be published in Science and Age and all these things. And I've seen that we have fantastic research group doing a lot of amazing stuff. But as Tobias said, it's at some point there's a gap. We have all these great ideas and we bring them to a level where they're still completely not interesting for any industrial partner, but they're still amazing already. And then what we need is this entrepreneurial spirit. And that's something why I would agree. We're just learning that to bring these things to the market, to bring it on the street, because this needs a different kind of courage than what the usual scientist has. So I would agree that there's a lot of potential, there's gigantic potential beyond cuckoo clocks and cars even. And this potential needs to be tapped. And it's I would say it's a matter of viewpoint. And this viewpoint and the idea how we perceive ourselves has to change a little bit. And that's going in the right direction.
So Tobias, why don't you tell us about FTTF? So we did a little bit of research, it has to do with the Fraunhofer Institute. But for the listeners, why don't you fill us in on what FTTF stands for and what it is that you are pursuing there in terms of investments?
FTTF means Fraunhofer Technology Transfer Fund. So that means that we do fund startups which are using Fraunhofer technology. It's a fund volume of 60 million, and our entry ticket is 250,000. We invest either as a convertible loan or as equity. And then we understand us more or less as a kind of a co-founding partner. So that means we take the first and most risky ticket in the early stage, and we form together with the team, the company, to reach first milestones. And then we are going out and are seeking further financing. And as FTTF has a larger volume of in the fund, so we can substantially further commit additional capital beside those small ticket at the beginning, up to 5 million per invested company.
Now, what exactly is Fraunhofer Technology? Is it any technologies that come out of the institute, or is it some sort of specific type of technology?
So we are not focusing on a specific investment field because Fraunhofer is a rather broad research institution with different R&D activities. So we are rather flexible in terms of technology investments or focus. And of course, a precondition is that startup is using any kind of Fraunhofer technology, either through a license agreement or that a member of the founding team was scientist at Fraunhofer, or there's any kind of cooperation taking place to develop a certain technology with the support of a Fraunhofer Institute.
So, Max, why don't you tell us now about ConstellR? For instance, what's the problem that you're focused on solving, and what's the solution that you're offering?
Yes, of course, Keith. So I want to segue in just a moment before going into that, is that it's not a single Fraunhofer Institute. So there are more than 70 institutes in Germany, and it's the largest research organization for applied science in whole Europe. So it's not a single institute, it's a whole organization of institutes. And that's the reason it is so important as a, let's say, R&D arm of Europe, not only of Germany. So what ConstellR is doing is we want to tackle the problem of freshwater. So the challenge with freshwater is that most of freshwater, more than 70%, is used to produce food. And that's good and it's needed because we have a growing population and we have a growing demographic demand and also a growing, we have a growing calorie demand. And nearly everything we eat more or less comes from agriculture. So as water drives food production, what drives water availability? And specifically in terms of looking at the future where we have climate change, increasing temperatures through global warming, and we already have water scarcity very high on the list of global problems or global challenges. And in the end, what water availability is driven is a temperature. If there's high temperature, we have a lot of loss of water. If there's lower temperature, less water is needed. But we have no means of globally monitor water usage. And that is something where ConstellR comes in. So that's exactly the fundamental data set ConstellR is going to deliver. And interestingly, and that's maybe a bit absurd if you think about it, in the end, it's a service which everybody on the ground is going to use, then the service tends to be from space. But space is a very scalable way of doing these things. And that's how we develop the technology and what we're going to deliver soon.
That's really interesting what you're doing there. I mean, it's unlike the conversations that you hear in the normal course of a day with technology companies. There's a lot of solutions and things that people are tackling, but this one is certainly a very unique approach. So why don't you tell us, Tobias, what is it that intrigued you with regards to ConstellR and Max? Why don't you tell us, about like your first meeting with him and what your impression was and what got you really excited about this?
Okay, Max, now you will hear the truth. Actually, when I heard about ConstellR the first time, I was, let's say, a bit of skeptic because I did not understood at a very early stage what's the story and technology about. But then when I met Max and he explained me the technology on the one hand side, I thought, okay, that's interesting. And then we took a closer look on the business case itself and the market. And I was quite surprised about this promising business case and also the market size. And beside the technology and the business case, which of course it still has to be proven, but they are very good on track, is that we are very excited about the team, especially about the commitment and their also their engagement. So those three criteria were rather clear for us to say, okay, ConstellR is a good business and investment case for FTTF.
So Max,
thanks for the flowers.
Yeah, I see you smiling there. So Max, look, people on the funding side, are very entrepreneurial, generally speaking, and are excited about new projects and working with new people. But when you're a founder and you're on the other side of the equation, very often it can be a very different experience because you're looking at having discussions to raise capital. So what was your initial impression when you met, with the team from FTTF? Were they very welcoming? Was it intimidating? Why don't you, did you have butterflies in your stomach? What was going on?
I think here was a bit of a special situation as we've been through a Fraunhofer accelerator. And the nice thing is that Tobias and me, we knew each other before I actually wanted something from Tobias in terms of budget or money or investment. So this is kind of, you get to know each other through these accelerators. And the accelerator is very closely watched by and accompanied by the FTTF, because the FTTF obviously is also screening for the companies and also giving insights. And as Tobias said, they understand themselves as a technology partner, as a business partner in the end, which is a bit more than just money. And so they're also already doing the accelerator, even with teams they might not be interested in investing. They're already helping them getting on track and to develop this entrepreneurial spirit. And that's something which is not schooled usually in the Fraunhofer environment. So here we already knew each other, so no butterflies really. Sorry, Tobias, but it was good to talk with someone who already knew you for some time, and where you had the feeling that you could be very transparent, and you didn't have to go directly into pitching, but just sitting down, explaining things, being asked questions, but not in the sense of like, look, I'm super skeptic, I don't believe all this, you have to convince me. But it's like, okay, let's have a look at this and try to comprehend it in a holistic way. And that is something which I like very much. And also on top of that, Fraunhofer is a peculiar environment. And there are not many funds or many investors which understand Fraunhofer. Even sometimes my feeling is that even Fraunhofer doesn't understand Fraunhofer. So the FTTF for us was someone who understood our situation, and also sometimes the difficulties, but also the benefits being a spin out from Fraunhofer. And that's something which made them very attractive from the start. Plus, they have really good engagement, and just also worked on the personal level.
So, Tobias, how many projects do you see going through the institute that you were keeping an eye on generally? I mean, you can tell Max that he was one out of how many?
Actually, Max was one out of 400.
1 out of 400.
Yeah. Actually, we, as Max just described, we are pretty well involved in the incubator program ahead of Fraunhofer. So we do get in touch with the teams in a rather early stage, and that's a big part of the deal flow is getting out of this program. But of course, we also have our internal network into the Fraunhofer Institute. There are around about 70 or 75 institutes, which are covering a budget of 2.4 billion euro a year. And there are almost 30,000 researchers in all those 75 institutes. And of course, we do have our own network into those research institutes, so to say. And we also get part of our deal flow directly from them.
Wow, that's quite a system there that they have in place. I mean, they're essentially the incubator, and then you're more of an accelerator to kind of pour the gas on the fire.
Exactly.
Wow. All right. So Max, now we're going to get into a little bit of fun here with your background. Postdoctorate, focusing on developing ultra-fast, low-energy electron diffraction. Makes it apparent you're brilliant in science and technology.
And a nerd, maybe too. Yeah.
Okay. So, but here's the question. You're obviously, a brilliant scientist. Now, what about as far as a CEO, which requires a completely different skill set? What are you finding challenging in the role of as a CEO?
Yeah. So yes, it is super challenging. But I must confess that even doing the postdoc or PhD or whatever, or diploma, I never had such a steep learning curve. That is which makes it most of all attractive to me. So I'm doing mistakes all the time. But yeah, I think that's part of it. And it's a completely new world. And the big thing here is that all my life I worked, yes, on brilliant technology with other brilliant people. It was fantastic. But I felt that I never really had the leverage in my hand to make an impact. And that is what is driving me here. And now suddenly I'm in the position where I can do that. And there's a direct connection between what I put in and what is coming out on the other side. And that is ultimately rewarding. Also, my feeling is that while sometimes I do miss the complexity, and also on the other hand, the simplicity of science, it's a very single-minded way of working on things, which is hugely pleasant. It's also extremely rewarding to build a company. And it's a completely new feeling, which I haven't had before and didn't have the chance before, and it requires a couple of characteristics I didn't know I had. So it's a very interesting journey, personally as well as professional. If I'll be a good CEO, I can't tell you, but you have to ask. You have to ask in a few years' time.
But I can confirm that the learning curve is fast, because first time when we met and discussed the business model of FTTF or of the business model of venture capital investors and how they think and how they work. So that was, I think, a rather quick explanation, and you picked it up quick, I would say, because the first discussions we had, I realized that you got it.
Well, that's very encouraging, I'm sure, for you to hear, Max. So what advice would you give to entrepreneurs who maybe have a real grand vision, but perhaps don't have the skills, the skill set to execute their business plan?
Okay, that's a tough one. So first of all, I think hold on to your vision. Hold on to your vision, because if you do something purpose-driven, it is the best way to do things. I mean, you can be in a high-paying job or something. If you're not following some kind of purpose, at some point, it'll just be tiring and maybe even boring. So hold on to the vision. The next thing is, I would say that being an entrepreneur is also never really about just you. It's about all the team and the network. So even if, let's say, you're the scientist or you're the communicator or you have some subset of skills you need, it's never be everything, but I am. So, and there are others which are really good at that. So the thing is, search amongst your peers, amongst your network, be open to new connections and search for those people which are completing your team. And then when you have a team, make sure you have the right team. That's important. But in the end, when you have the team, then you can do everything. And it doesn't have to be, it's not less rewarding if you're not the CEO, but the CTO or just an employee or anybody. But if you're part of this journey and you bring whatever you have on the table and you see that it creates something maybe bigger as the sum of the individual parts, that is something which I would recommend to everybody. So don't shy away. Also, maybe without getting sidetracked too much, but usually when we're looking back, we see how we develop and how we evolve as people. So 2 years back, I couldn't, speak Spanish, and now my Spanish is still bad, but kind of okay. But if we look in the future, we usually have a static view of ourselves. So here, what encourage yourself is like, don't think about what you are now and what you can do now, but think about, hey, what could I learn in 1 year, in 2 years, in 3 years from now? And that is something which could be very encouraging. So sometimes I'm taking on tasks which for me right now are impossible, but I'm of the, let's say, I believe very firmly of the conviction that in 1 year time or 2 years time, I'll be able to tackle that task. So yeah, there you go. That's my 30 seconds of wisdom.
Well, I think it's great advice. And I think what's really remarkable is you obviously are highly motivated, internally motivated. I mean, you're really excited about what you're doing, and you have this enthusiasm that you don't always see it in entrepreneurs. A lot of entrepreneurs, they may express it differently, but you're really excited about it. And I'm sure that's probably something that's probably fun for Tobias there. Yeah, it's contagious. So tell us about how you're working with Max and helping and supporting him with the things that he needs.
Yeah, I mean, actually, we figure out the topics we have to support our investments. Yeah, either on the financing side, on the business model, on the go-to-market strategy side, and also what are the next milestones which should be achieved in order to go out for the next financing round. Yeah. And what are the frames in terms of pre-money evaluation, capital requirements, and those topics. And then also we advise how to set up, let's say, data rooms or financial planning tools, which is important to get a better understanding about the business case itself, the company development, or what has to be achieved until when, with assuming the next financing round is taking place. So those are the topics. We also discussed the other one we just heard from Max in regard to the team. Yeah, in many startups, the team is not complete. We addressed this topic from the very beginning, and we figure out if the founders are open to enlarge the team on the C level. And also to say, okay, I'm not an expert in accounting or in finance, so let's watch out for someone who's better. Yeah, so I can build the company with my strengths. Yeah? And that is also very important to raise those topics on a rather open discussion without putting somebody under pressure.
Right, but very often you don't always have the budget.
That's true.
So in that case, you have to learn the skill set, right? The pressure is on.
Yes.
Just remember that, Max.
Yeah, no, I remember, but I second that opinion of Tobias, that I can confirm it. If we have questions, they're there for us. If we don't have questions, they're not pushing or anything. So it's a very, very good partnership in that sense. So we report and do this, but it's not like over the top or something. And I think in the end, this team building is something which is super important. And yes, you have to kind of balancing out, like, okay, what is a skill worth learning, and what is a skill where maybe I just need to buy it in. If, for example, we are going to process a lot of data, so is it worth learning how to process all this data if you are, I don't know, the CTO or something? And the answer is probably, initially it might be helping, but in the end, probably not, because you're going to have management duties. So get someone who is doing that full time for you. But if it's something else, for example, it's like, okay, how do I do negotiations? Well, that's definitely something I need to learn. I need to get better at, because that is part of, I would say, my job description. And it's a balance thing. So learn, but sometimes admit that it makes more sense to get someone. And then also, if you're lacking the budget, and you happen to know your VC, maybe you can have a talk to.
Somehow or another, I think something's coming down the road for you, Tobias. There may be an ask coming. I'm just throwing that out there.
Let's see. Yeah.
So, Tobias, let's just pivot here for a second. So we have a lot of VCs that, roughly half of our audience are VC firms that are listening. And you are actually in, I think, a very unique situation because of how you see companies and how you work with them. You're probably a lot closer than most other VCs are with the companies that are coming up working with them. What advice would you give on working with tech founders to other VC firms that are looking for better outcomes for their portfolios?
Yeah, there are many advices, actually. First of all, I would say that they should be more open for the deep tech, meaning that they should, first of all, of course, understand technology to a certain extent, but then also understand that the business model and the market potential behind. Because sometimes we also invest in, let's say, business or companies which do have an extremely strong unique selling proposition from a technology point of view and an attractive market, but which are not, they do not have the potential of a unicorn, but it's still rather attractive to invest in. And FTTF is a rather broad investment vehicle in terms of technologies. I would advise, take a look at our portfolio, be open-minded, get in touch with us, and then we can figure out if this or that portfolio is an interesting company for follow-on investment.
Yeah, we see more and more VC firms co-investing, although a lot of them don't see it that way. They're actually sharing a lot of information to get better outcomes. And I think that's become a lot more commonplace. It's certainly not the general rule, but in previous interviews, we found that to be the case, that people are beginning to be more open to having those discussions. So that's great to hear from, coming from your side, that you see it that way. Max, tell us, how many other VC firms did you actually speak with to get funding? How long of a process was that? Because, some people are talking to 100, 300. You said you had a relationship. So, how hard did you really have to work to get the money?
I don't really have a reference point. Yeah, so it was the first funding round we did, but it took about 8 months in total, from first initial sketch of the how much money do we actually need, and let's make a strategy about who to talk to and when. And initially, all the investors we in the end chose came on relatively late, except for Tobias and the FTTF. So they were all in only for the last 4 months of that. We had I think I conducted around 500 calls, and I spoke to 60 or 70 VCs and angels. Yeah, that was about it. So not 300, but also not only 10. The advantage here was that 2 of the investors we have, one is the FTTF, we knew for quite some time. So we were relatively confident that it could work out, at least on the professional as well as personal level. On the other hand, we also have a strategic investor on board, which is the largest German space company, OHB. And we knew them for a couple of years, even by simply working on them on the working level. So this also kind of gradually opened up this opportunity. So I would say worked hard enough, but not over the top.
How long did it take you until you really felt, in the process of speaking and doing your presentation, how far in did it take you until you really felt that you really got your presentation down and you were really communicating well and getting your message across and starting to get a good response? How long did it take you?
That's a question I can answer, but I think even better, Tobias would be the one to answer, because he's probably heard the pitch a million times. So
okay, so let's ask him. How many times?
Tobias, go first, please.
Yeah, actually, we have a kind of investment committee we propose. So it's kind of a committee which gives us advice. And we informed them with a kind of a short paper, not more than 6, maximum 8 pages. And it's some space where to really go through all the topics, meaning an executive summary, the business case, the capital market, the technology, and so forth, and the team. And especially the business model and the technology, which is what the technology can deliver, was not very, I would say, clear from a potential investor point of view. And here I would say we had quite some, let's say, changes or on and goes to optimize. And the learning curve was also quite good. But I would estimate maybe we circled this paper 10 times, roundabout.
So I just have it open. It was 16 times. We circled it 16 times, yeah. Okay. And it took about pretty much 1 month to circle it back and forth. So every 2 days there was a new version, and yeah.
So, but it took you 16 versions, and then only then you're saying is when you felt that you were really getting the message. How many people had you hadn't really talked to anybody before? I mean, you waited until you went through those versions before you reached out to the other 60 or 70?
No. This was before. So I would say that it took about between 4 and 5 months to get kind of to feel that the resonance was positive towards what we were pitching. And then it took another 3 to 4 months to get to the point of actually signing something. And this process here actually happened just in the last months before the actual signature then occurred. So this iteration of the time. So it was at a relatively late stage, but it was a bit away from the pitch, more an in-depth executive review of what we were doing. So a different language. I think that's the reason we had to iterate the story a few more times.
Well, it's nice to hear that, because for people who were raising money, some people it's very easy. The majority, though, it's very hard. They'll tell you, it could be 50 or 100 people that they reach out to before they're actually starting to get some decent feedback. So you're in a unique situation and you have a great group of people around you. What do you see, Tobias? What do you see happening there in the near term?
In general, about our portfolio, you mean?
Well, I'm saying let's talk about Max's case first. How do you see things progressing there? You're obviously excited. You brought these people on.
I'm very excited. Yeah, I'm very excited because they are on track related to the milestones we set together. And also the feedback from other investors without being out in the market is rather positive. So they are asking us, please get in touch as soon as you start the next financing round. So
good to know.
Did you speak Did you speak with all the investors? Did they talk amongst themselves before everybody invested, or no?
I mean, as we are an early stage investor, we have rather strong network for investors in the later stage, right? So that means for us it's important to have such network, and we have some of them. We have regular exchange about projects, about portfolio companies, not in detail, more on a rather basic level. But there they watch out, and then they mention to us, hey, okay, this company is of interest. And then we say, okay, or we will get back to you as soon as we start a financing round. Or we bring you in touch with the team, with the founders, so they can learn them. Because it's also a matter of knowing the team, understanding and speaking the same language. So you can gain this time a little bit in advance before starting an official financing round. So everybody knows each other on a first basic pitch. That's very important.
But also to add to this answer is also that the 4 investors we have, they know each other. And this was one of the things we didn't want to have having investors where there might be, I don't know, whatever kind of tension in between them. But I'm very proud to have this kind of consortium of investors understanding or supporting in particular the financial side, but also technology side, and also the impact side. And that is something which I think is really nicely balanced from my point of view. So here we have good vibes so far.
So Max, what did you learn through this process? Obviously, you have a group of investors, but you have to make sure that everybody's interests are covered, right? So you have a lead investor perhaps that you're working with, but then you need to make sure everybody else's interests are covered as well. What did you learn through that process, trying to balance everybody's, requests and demands? What did you learn through that process?
So the first thing we learned is that you can't balance, or not everybody will be fully happy. So it's always going to compromise, and a compromise is something which hurts everybody, at least to a certain extent. That is something. The second thing is that also don't try too hard to bend yourself in a direction if the investor is not the right type of investor for you. So make sure that you stay true to yourself, that you have your purpose, your principles, and you're not creating another company just because you think this is the investor you need, and the investor sees your company, would like to see your companies with other eyes. And that was something which, with all the investors we have now, which was very positively felt that that's exactly not what they're doing, but they're leaving us be. Basically, the company we would like to be. So this was one of the things. The next thing was negotiation is a tough thing. So figuring out how you bring yourself in a position of strength is something quite difficult. It was challenging. That's the second thing. And the third thing is that there are always things which will go not the way as they are planned. That's just part of it. So just be transparent about these things. In our case, for example, it was a co-founder leaving just 3 weeks before the term sheet should be signed. So that was a challenge, and we somehow managed it.
So Tobias, you've done a few investments over the years, correct?
Right, yes.
If you had to guess, how many would you say?
I mean, we as FTTF did 20 investments so far. Yeah.
Okay.
I was involved in over, I would say, 50 or more investments.
Yeah. In this particular transaction, what did you learn?
Actually, I learned that Max is a rather good negotiator. Keep the balls in the air. And we had quite some discussions about it. And we, let's say, reached the stage when we said, okay, Max, now we want to close it, and take it or leave it. Yeah. So we said, okay, that is our offer. And now it's you to take it or to leave it. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I first, thanks of all for considering me a good negotiator. I don't think I was. Maybe I learned quite a bit during the phase, but it was like getting on the bike and then started rolling downhill and learning while you're rolling downhill how to actually operate the bike was quite interesting.
It's called real life.
I think so. But that's exactly the part which I love, because it's a challenge. It's something I haven't done before, but you learn so much. And I think now I would negotiate differently. But so would Tobias, and so it's a learning process. And
maybe not. He might not negotiate differently.
No, he knows me better now, so we'd negotiate different too. Yeah, so it's a matter of in the end, it's a matter of taking certain risks and estimating what the other person is doing. But also, and that is very important. You can negotiate to a point where you destroy every deal or any deal, and the important part is to keep in mind that if you're serious about what you're doing, then you would like to work with those people afterwards. So don't destroy the relationship. Don't bring it to a point where you can't work afterwards anymore. That's also not, for the sake of having 1% or more or 2% more equity or something in the end. So it's a relationship game. And like in every relationship, there needs to be a certain balance. So it's okay, have your point of view, but also be ready to compromise to a certain extent. And I think that's one of the core things I probably learned, if I can put it in a nutshell, is before going into negotiation, that's what we didn't do initially, but before going negotiation, know your boundaries. Know where you start and know where the line is beyond which you're not going to make the deal. And if you have this kind of boundary, then it is easier to not get carried away by emotions, because in the end, it's you're negotiating about a value which you created over the years, where there's a lot of research going in, which is your baby in the end. And that is something which can be very powerful. So, but if you do this, if you have a structured approach to it, and you kind of set your boundaries beforehand, this helps a lot. And then you can go in with an easy mind, and then usually I think it's to the benefit of all sides.
Great. So Tobias, let's talk about how people can get in touch with you, because we talked about earlier about you're interested and open to new relationships and arrangements. How can people get a hold of you if they're interested in co-investing or partnering with you somehow, or even coming, getting involved in maybe a tech company looking for capital? How can they find you?
I mean, of course, we do have our website, FTTF.vc. There, our email address is mentioned. They can drop us an email, so we will reply for sure, or just give us a call, and then we can discuss about their current setup and the fit or the link to Fraunhofer, or their interest to co-invest. What's their technology focus? So later stage funds are more industry focused in many cases. Yeah.
Is there a particular portal on the website that they complete some information? Or is there an email address?
Yeah, it's email address. Our website, the portfolio is mentioned. It's shortly described with a link to the portfolio website itself. So there you can receive the most important information, I would say.
Okay, terrific. Now, how about you, Max? How do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, we also have a homepage. It's www.constellr.space. So ConstellR.space. And you can also mail me privately. That's info@constellr.space. And yeah, we also make sure to reply, and looking forward to it.
Who would be a couple ideal partners for you?
Couple of deal partners. So what you're currently doing is, so maybe a bit in our own, so a bit about us. So what's going to happen within the next 12 months is that we're going from being a pre-orbital company to becoming an orbital company. So having something in space. And the first asset we're going to have, the first system we're going to have in space, it's going to be launched on 1st of February next year. So we might be in the US, or we will be in the US, hopefully having a launch party then. This will create a massive amount of data. So we're looking for pilot customers which are willing to work with us on making this data having an impact. This could be pilot customers in agriculture, but there are more than 30 use cases we've identified so far, also beyond agriculture. So let's say if you want to optimize water consumption on fields, or you're an analytics company, please talk to us. If you're interested in monitoring permafrost, please talk to us. If you're interested in monitoring industrial, let's say either power plants or monitoring oil pipelines, please talk to us. That's all potential use cases. And we are currently looking for conducting a couple more pilots. Some we already have. This would be an ideal person to speak to us.
Terrific. Well, I want to thank you both for sharing your time today and, giving your candid view of what happened, and also sharing your experience and your advice. It's really invaluable. So thank you again. And
you're most welcome.
Yes. And hopefully we'll be able to check back with you and get some stories about the progress that you've made. So thank you again, and we'll talk with you soon. And that's another episode of Funding and Disrupting.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Funding and Disrupting. Don't forget to visit our sponsor, auraco.com, to learn more about working directly with Aura Collective's exclusive technology PR team. They'll help you craft your message, get noticed in the press, and help you get your venture to the funding finish line. Again, you can visit them at www.auraco.com. Keep funding and keep disrupting.